The Trump administration has signed a peace agreement between the DRC and Rwanda last week. It was welcomed by the United Nations as a significant step towards de-escalation, peace and stability, and by many other observers. But will it solve underlying issues? And is there too much emphasis on securing mineral access for the US? Well, we have Bram Verelst from the Institute of Strategic Studies to help us break down whether this marks real change. Hi, Bram. Nice again to see you. So is this a major step forward?
I think I mean, the answer is a bit more complicated than that. So, I think it is a step forward because this is the first time that we have a peace agreement, any peace agreement since the resurgence of M23 in November 2021. So yes, it is an important step, and it addresses some of the issues at hand in the conflict, but not all. Not all. And it's not a comprehensive agreement, but it's a regional agreement that offers some hope.
Okay, well, is there too much focus on rare minerals and the deals on that?
The peace agreement itself, not so much. So, of course, there has been a lot of attention going to the question of these mineral deals that are in negotiation between Congo and United States, but also Rwanda and United States. And this agreement foresees a regional economic framework within 3 months that would allow for economic deals, US investments, economic cooperation. So it is a component of the agreement, but the main detailed part of this peace agreement is heavily focused on the security aspect. And that means, on the one hand, engagements made to neutralize the Rwandan armed group FDLR, which has been based in Eastern DRC for over 30 years through various different iterations. On the one hand, and on the other hand, the withdrawal of Rwandan defensive measures, what everybody understood as the withdrawal of Rwandan troops and the end of Rwandan support to M23. So that's actually the core aspect of this agreement, is around the security bargain between Rwanda and the DRC. While you can see the economic component is more providing the kind of sticks, carrots. That's a carrot then of the agreement, is the prospect of U.S. investments and the prospect of economic cooperation, which is not unimportant neither.
So it was quite interesting watching that news conference where the two leaders, one of DRC and Rwanda, was there, and also Mr. Trump. It looked quite friendly, a bit friendlier than the first one. So what can we read from that?
I think, well, maybe one part is maybe just basic politeness towards Trump, because that it is this agreement is also about him in a way. It's about his shining light on his ability to make peace, and he talked about him deserving this Nobel Prize. So it's also putting the light a bit on himself. I do think that. So I must say I do have some skepticism on the peace agreement. I will talk about that later, but I do think that both the DRC and Rwanda have some elements that they can be happy with or can take home. So from the perspective of Kinshasa, the key issue at hand in this conflict has been the Rwandan aggression and the Rwandan presence in Eastern DRC. And this agreement at least addresses that issue rather directly. And from the Rwanda side, a lot of the agreement involves around those security interests, the FDLR, which has been putting forward all along. And also, if you look at the specific conditions of the Rwandan withdrawal, and this is where I'm also a bit skeptical about, the withdrawal of Rwandan forces does not seem to be unconditional here. And this goes against what we have seen, for example, in UN resolutions, UN Security Council resolution, which calls for the withdrawal of Rwandan forces without conditions. This peace agreement calls for the simultaneous neutralization of the FDLR, as well as the withdrawal of Rwandan defensive measures, withdrawal of Rwandan troops. And that opens the door to a more conditional approach, whereby Rwanda can actually maintain its troops in Eastern DRC as long as the FDLR neutralization is not taking place. And given the complexity of doing this, it can open the door for a more prolonged presence of Rwanda. So I think that's some point of criticism here, or skepticism on the peace deal, is that there are some pitfalls. and that will require a continued US engagement as well as external engagement into the process, because Trump might consider this now a done deal, but actually it has only just started now.
Yeah, that's what I think what kind of people are worried about when Trump is involved, that, there's the big photo opportunity, but what happens after that? So what other issue remains unresolved?
So I think within this specific agreement, considering heavy focus on security, it has been decided to create a joint security coordinating mechanism, which would be involving Congolese, Rwandan, American, mostly intelligence military presence. It also opens the door for other external actors to get involved, and that mechanism is supposed to monitor and follow up on this kind of bargain, the neutralization of FDLR and the withdrawal of defensive measures. So I think the real work now is to take control of this process. We know that Kinshasa and Kigali have very, very different perspectives on the conflict, on FDLR, on the key issues at hand. So this joint security cooperation mechanism will have quite some challenges, and so it will require a lot of um, attention and a lot of effort within that process to make this happen. Secondly, of course, the problem in the east is not limited to Rwandan involvement. We talk about the M23 rebellion. There is the M23 rebel movement, and there is the Rwandan external support to this rebellion. So this peace agreement only addresses the regional components. It does include some aspects that were also put on the table by M23. For instance, the agreements on the return of refugees, which it has been calling for. But the actual negotiations between M23 and the Congolese government are taking place in a separate process, which is led by Qatar, which is called the Doha process. And there's also a more national efforts for national dialogue that are ongoing in the DRC itself. So even if this agreement would bring some positive developments, it's still only one part of the solution.
So which external parties do you expect to become involved in the process?
I think Qatar has been involved all along. It has been also a witness to this peace agreement. It has taken part in the negotiations, also because it wants to have some complementarity between what they are facilitating in the talks between M23 and the DRC. And we know that Rwanda is also involved, behind the scenes in this process. And what was the talks were ongoing. Led by the United States, and that is to avoid similar mistakes that have been made in the past. In the past, we had the regional peace talks led by Angola, and we had the negotiations or talks between armed groups and the Congolese government led by the Nairobi process. And those were two very, very disconnected processes. So now they have done more efforts to get actors involved. So that includes Qatar, but also the African Union appointed mediator, the Togolese president, Glassingbe, is involved in some ways into the process, as are the members of the panel of facilitators who are appointed by the EAC SADC process, which still exists, although it has not been really in the spotlight. But so I think there will be continued efforts to involve also those African regional actors into the process, although they are not the driving forces behind the peace talks.
Well, as you mentioned, we've seen similar efforts before. What, if anything, sets this one apart?
I think that the fact that it's under United States mediated agreement, this is quite new, and of course there also comes the economic part into play, because it is true what you say that previous formal and informal, because we also have seen informal agreements between the DRC and Rwanda in the past. They often evolved around the same kind of bargain, which was actions against FDLR and the withdrawal of Rwandan forces, which also then provide some grounds for skepticism here, because it's not the first time that we see this kind of deal. But I think the economic cooperation and the prospect of investments is quite a new approach to be integrated that directly into the process. So I think that would be the main factor in this deal.
Well, the main reason that the Trump administration is probably so keen, yes, apart from they said, yes, they want peace. But, so far, Trump has in the past not shown such interest in Africa, except now, there's the earth minerals, the rare minerals, that is a big draw card. So, probably he expects quite quick results. He talks already about American firms on the ground. Is that realistic?
There are some American investments in the mining sector, also in the east. So, but I do think that a very direct change is not really realistic at this point. Most actors would agree that what is needed first is some kind of stability before such large investments could really take place. So we'll have to see. I think this is not going to be a short-term deal, and it would take some time before we would see major changes on that on the ground. I also want to note that there is talk about this regional economic integration. Now, this is mainly involving the DRC and Rwanda. There's also other actors, of course, in the region. There is Uganda, who also has interests in the area. So there is also some caution. I think here is that all those actors neighboring the DRC have to kind of navigate each other's interests as well. So and there is the intent within the peace agreement to link the economic cooperation to already existing economic cooperation frameworks, even including the International Conference for the Great Lakes region. So there is quite some questions still on how this kind of will work institutionally and how this will embed it within the region.
What we saw with Israel and Iran, just to compare to another conflict that has been going on for years, because Trump kept on saying at that news conference, this has been going for 30 years, is that he at some stage got really impatient with both Iran and Israel and even swore at a news conference. So if things don't start really moving in the direction, can we expect the same kind of reaction that Trump sort of gets impatient with the fact that it's not moving?
I think that is very, very much the case indeed, and that's one of the risks. I think also that is inherent in this agreement is that yeah, we have to consider this. Of course, the United States is the kind of mediator of this agreement, but it's essentially the Trump administration, and you rightly point out that this is a characteristic of him, and I think he has a. I mean, it's not a secret that he has a very limited understanding of what this conflict is about. The few times he has expressed himself about it, he has said some rather strange things about the conflict itself, and I think in his mindset there is a risk that he thinks that now there is a peace agreement, and now the way the road is paved for all the rest meanings, particularly these kind of mineral deals and these economic agreements. But that's not going to be the case, and anybody who has been following the Great Lakes region or Eastern DRC will know that this conflict is very much protracted there and is connected to a lot of political dynamics that are not addressed by these peace agreements at all. And so the transactional approach that is put forward here will only go so far. And maybe it will allow for some US investments to take place, because it can also lead to a sort of status quo situation where M23 will not expand its territory anymore, but just remain where they are for the time being, which would allow for economic investments in perhaps in other areas outside of M23 control. But there are also reports that the US was eyeing investments in mines under M23 control, and so this is of course a very sensitive issue that the Congolese authorities will not agree with, that there would be such an investment while a mine is under rebel control. And the M23 movement has also clearly stated that they are not intent on withdrawing and that this peace agreement does not concern them directly. So this is not addressed by the current peace deal.
So do you think it's a mistake not to have drawn M23 rebels into this conversation or this peace agreement?
I think that's difficult because there have been efforts in the past to do that, to have one process, and that has always bumped into objections, particularly from the side of Kinshasa, who has always prioritized kind of negotiating or talking directly with Rwanda, because they consider Rwanda as the master of the situation here, and M23 as this puppet of Rwanda. And so obtaining the Rwanda withdrawal is the key issue here for the DRC. And so including M23 in that process would, for them, muddy the waters in a way. And so that's one of the reasons why we have these separate processes. So I think that's difficult to have included them in one. And it was also seen in the past that often there was this regional agreement first before there was an opening for a more domestic negotiation or domestic peace deal. So this kind of follows similar lines that we've seen in the past. So in that sense, it was not that easy to include them. There are these efforts to have combined them or to seek complementarity, but the demands are also not the same. M23 is basically asking kind of local power, almost the creation of the state within the state. There's talk about demands for kind of restructuring, political reforms, greater autonomy of the East. Those are different bargains than neutralization of FDLR and the Rwanda withdrawal. So combining them would pose some risks for the DRC in this, but also for Rwanda, because the M23 movement also has a political wing. And this political wing is much less linked to Rwandan interests. It has much more political interests related to change of national leadership, to tensions between Kabila and Tshisekedi. And so it's far from clear that they would also very clearly defend Rwanda's interests in this. So it is also in a way in Rwanda's interest to have a process wherein they are the ones who can set the terms for an agreement, rather than having to go back to M23 or AFC to harmonize positions. Normally, the heads of state will also still meet this summer. So Kagame, Tshisekedi will also have this moment in Washington. It was foreseen in July. I don't know the exact timing, but this is also still part of the kind of process that now at the Ministers of Foreign Affairs there is this peace agreement made, and then the presidents will also meet to discuss security in the Great Lakes region. It's not a signing ceremony, so the peace agreement is a done deal in a way, but it is still part of the kind of US mediation to have it at the highest level, which was failed during the Luanda process, because under the Angola mediation, the Luanda process also got as far as having a ministerial agreement, but then they needed to proceed to a presidential signing, and that was eventually last minute cancelled by President Kagame because of the DRC's refusal to include commitments to a dialogue with M23. So, but this is still normally happening this summer.
So we'll watch out for that one as well. Very interesting. I'm sure there will be a press conference at the White House.
Yeah, looking forward to that one.